Okay, it's 12:30, so it's time to start the class. Are there any questions about anything that we've covered so far? Okay, I'm seeing lots of no's. All right, I'm gonna add something here. Psychotherapy is due this Saturday, psychotherapy. But it says here the essay is due too. But this is the first day where I expect the essays to be starting to turn in. But you have until December 7th. December 7th is the last day I'll take them. I will not take them after December 7th. So you have until December 7th to finish your essays up. I would suggest doing them before Thanksgiving so that you don't have to worry about them during Thanksgiving. But you can turn them in up to December 7th. After that, if you haven't turned one in, then it's a 0. Do you understand? Okay, I'm seeing lots of yeses. All right. So if there are no questions, then I will continue with psychotherapy, which is where we were last time. And we were talking about the etiologies of a pathology. Okay, these are the causes of or the symptoms of pathology. And there are 6 of them that I'm going to list here, but there are plenty of others. There's many more. And the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistics Manual, is the way that we follow the etiologies to determine what a particular pathology is. We don't say you have this pathology and then look up the symptoms of it. We look up symptoms and then determine what the pathology is based on the different types of symptoms that you have. So these are 6 of those symptoms. Let's look at these particular 6. The first one is distress. Does the individual show unusual or prolonged levels of unease or anxiety? Anxiety is a symptom of other issues as well as being its own pathology itself, but it can certainly be a part of another pathology as well. Maladaptiveness. Does the person act in ways that interfere with his or her well-being and the needs of society? That's maladaptiveness. Irrationality. Does the person act or talk in ways that are irrational or incomprehensible to other people? It used to be in my day when I was a kid, if you saw somebody walking down the sidewalk by themselves, but they're talking to themselves, then you just sort of, moved aside, let them pass. Today, if somebody's walking down the sidewalk, it could have this etiology or cause or a symptom of a pathology, but they could also be talking on an earbud phone, so you don't have any idea really if these people have a problem or if they're just talking, or maybe they're talking to the phone, but the phone isn't on. Irrationality. Unpredictable behavior. Does the individual behave erratically and inconsistently at different times or from one situation to another as if experiencing a loss of control? That's unpredictable behavior. Unconventional and undesirable behavior. Does the person behave in ways that are statistically rare and violate social norms of what is legal or morally acceptable or desirable? Social norms, meaning it has to be in a specific society, different enough in that society that it is legal or morally unacceptable or undesirable. Observer discomfort is, does the individual behave in such a way as to make those around him or her feel uncomfortable, threatened, or distressed? This is the definition of a bully. And remember, these things, you have to have them as a pattern. It has to happen over and over and over and over again, and it has to keep you from being able to meet the demands of life. And certainly a bully fits that description. It happens over and over and over. They're always like that. They're always causing distress and uncomfort for other people, and eventually will lead for them not to be able to meet the demands of life. You need 2 of the 6 symptoms in order to be classified with a mental disorder. So the question is, do you have a mental disorder? I've already answered that question, but let's see, right? Have you had a time in your life when you felt blue for no apparent reason? I have, definitely. Felt blue. I don't know why. That's distress. All right? Have you ever done something rather than study when you knew you should be studying? Every one of you has to raise your hands on that one, because I know at some point you have done something that you shouldn't have been doing. You should have been studying instead. That's just the way we are, right? Maladaptive behaviors. Have you ever had an experience in which you thought you saw or heard something that was not really there? Me too. Irrational behavior. Have you had a flash of temper in which you said something that you later regretted? Oh, yeah, especially to my mother. I shouldn't have done that. Unpredictable behavior. Have you had unusual thoughts that you never told anybody about? Unconventional behaviors. And have you ever distressed someone because of something you said or did? Oh, yeah, absolutely. I have done that numerous times in my life. Right? So I have all 6. How many of you guys have? I'll bet there's lots of you that have all 6 of them as well, at least 2 of them, right? Does that mean that you have a pathology? The answer is no. These are symptoms. They have to reoccur over and over and over in a pattern, and they have to cause you enough distress and also keep you from meeting the demands of life. So although everyone has experienced at least 2 of the etiologies on the previous page, a psychopathology is any pattern of emotions, behaviors, or thoughts inappropriate to the situation, leading to personal distress and or the inability to achieve important goals in life. Most of the etiologies that normal people experience are not persistent. Sure, I have upset people in my life, but I went back and I apologized and I made amends, right? And I don't do it over and over and over, and it doesn't keep me from meeting the demands of life. Right? So be comforted. You probably do not have a psychopathology. And as I said before, if you know you do, congratulations on getting this far. You have done a great job. You have come this far. You are in college, and you are I have nobody that's actually failing the class at this point. So you have met some of the demands of life, right? And you are either doing therapy or taking your medications, whatever it is. So congratulations, you are doing well in this class, and you are doing well in life if you do have a pathology. The rest of you, you do not have a pathology simply because you have a symptom. I want to make sure of that, because we're going to be talking about different types of pathologies, and I don't want you to go, oh, I have that. No, you do not have that. All right, so a clinical diagnosis is the process of matching an individual's specific symptoms to those that define a particular mental disorder. And how we arrange it is through a book called the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual, and it's in the 5th generation of its publications. So the most widely used system is the DSM-5, classification disorders by their mental and behavioral symptoms. We look up the symptoms, we follow the symptoms lead us to a particular pathology. The 5th edition of the Diagnostics and Statistics Manual of Mental Disorders is the most widely accepted classification system in the United States. There are other types of manuals, books, that define different ways to look at pathologies in Europe, for instance. So this is the DSM-5 is for the United States, and it is owned by the American Psychiatric Association. The psychiatrists own this book. They're the ones that get to decide how to edit it, what to put into it. And the DSM-5, when it was released in 2013, had many changes in the categorizations and names of pathologies. For instance, Asperger's syndrome. Do you all know what Asperger's is? Have you ever heard of Asperger's? Do you know anybody with Asperger's? It's fairly common. Yes, yes, and yes, yes, yes. All right. So some of you have it. All right. So Asperger's, the main symptom for Asperger's is that it's very difficult to tell when somebody's emotions, whatever anybody else's emotions, and it's hard to tell your own emotions as well. So Asperger's tells us that if I know that somebody has Asperger's, I know that what I would do for a normal person that I would think was being abusive verbally, I can tell that to an Asperger's person and they understand it at a different level. They don't feel it's abusive. You tell somebody, it is time to stop this conversation, I'm done. Now, most people would think that was rude, but for an Asperger's person, okay, now I understand where you are. You can be completely upset, mad, just raging upset in front of an Asperger's person. They cannot understand your emotional state or their own emotional state in many cases. And if you say somebody's Asperger's, I know exactly what to expect from that person. But it's no longer called Asperger's anymore. It's now because of the psychiatrist did not like Asperger, the man it's named after. They decided he was not a nice person, so they wanted to take away this credit from him, and so they no longer call it Asperger's. They now call it high-functioning autism, which tells me zero, nothing, because autism has many, 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 many other symptoms associated with it, and that's just, it's useless. Useless. But psychiatrists get to decide what to do with this manual. Psychologists do not get to do what say. The neurotic disorders I've talked about, I said we don't call them neuroses anymore. We call it conversion disorders, and we'll talk about them. So before DSM-4, these were terms used to describe a pattern of subjective distress or self-defeating behaviors that did not show signs of brain abnormalities. You could look in their brain. There's nothing wrong with their brains in the MRIs, CAT scans. There's nothing wrong. And there's no gross irrational thinking either. They're fairly rational people. Now we call them conversion disorders, and we'll talk about them. The psychotic disorders or psychoses involves a loss of contact with reality, and it's a disorder involving profound disturbances in perception, rational thinking, and affect, or mood or emotion. The mood disorder, since we're talking about mood, since I mentioned it, there are mood disorders, and the two major mood disorders are bipolar and unipolar. So mood disorders are abnormal disturbances in emotions or mood, including bipolar and unipolar disorders. Mood disorders are also called affective disorders because mood, emotion, and affect all mean the same thing. Bipolar disorder is a mental abnormality involving swings of mood from mania to depression, so it's also called manic depressive disorder as well. Remember, I at one point in one of my lectures, I told you that your happiness and depression level was sort of like a specific range. Some people have a smaller range, some people have a longer range, but they're being held together by a rubber band. Okay? And if you have something really happy happen to you, then it slowly that rubber band pulls you back into normality. And if you have something really sad happen to you, then it pulls you back into reality. And you live most of your life in that range. Well, bipolar is like having that rubber band broken. And so they're off and running anywhere. They have no way to control their specific range. And so they range from manic to depressive, back and forth, manic to depressive. You can consider manic to be a very, very high elation state, a very extreme, excessive excitement. So depression, we all know depression, pathological sadness, or despair. And this bipolar has been diagnosed at an average age of 15. So there are people that are average, means people earlier and people later, an average age of 15, and at a rate 15% higher than it was 50 years ago. For some reason, there's a lot more bipolar being diagnosed. Now, maybe it's because we understand bipolar better than we did before, and now we have an actual way to determine bipolar that's easier to determine, and so that's why we're seeing more of it. It doesn't necessarily mean there wasn't this much back in the past 50 years ago, but we just couldn't see it before. The other one is unipolar, and that is almost always depression. There are very few people that live in mania. When you're in mania, you do really really dangerous things. Because when you're living in mania, you're not thinking straight. When you're excited, remember, emotions trump thoughts. So you're not thinking straight when you're high in emotional state. And either high being highly depressed or high being highly manic, right? Excitement. So a person that is highly manic will kill themselves without thinking about it. They won't, I want to get over there on that side of the railroad tracks. I need something that's on that side of the railroad tracks, and they just walk across the railroad tracks without thinking about the fact there's a train coming. So they put themselves in dangerous positions where they will die, and it looks like they committed suicide, but no, they just weren't thinking. They will purchase. They have to purchase. They want to buy things. And they will empty their bank accounts and max out their credit cards. And then if they see money lying around or a credit card lying around and they know they can't use their own, they go and they use yours. Or they take your money. It's not stealing to them. They're not thinking about the stealing. The intelligent portion is gone. They just need to do this, and so they're going to get it done any way they can get it done. Of course, it's breaking the law, but they're not. If they had thought about it, they wouldn't have done it. But they're manic. They can't think about what they're doing. And there are not very many people that live in the manic state for very long. Now, in the depressed state, there are lots of people that live in the depressed state. It is the commonest of all diagnosed major mental disorders, unipolar depression. And it is not the most common. The most common is not diagnosed as much because most people who are anxious, which is the most common, anxious people hide it inside. They look fine on the outside, but they're freaking out on the inside. But in depression, you see the person depressed and you go, let's get you to a doctor so that we can help you. And so the unipolar depression is the most common diagnosis in the United States. It costs $43 billion in the United States alone. And that's not the medical costs alone. That's also the cost and loss of productivity because people who are depressed cannot work as well. 1 in every 50 succeeds in committing suicide. Men succeed at suicide way more than women do, but women attempt suicide more often than men do. They just do it more passively. They'll take drugs, or they'll do something that takes a long time for them to die, and so there's plenty of time for them to be rescued. There isn't any time to rescue a man who uses a gun and shoots himself. There is no time. So it is 10 to 20 times greater than it was 50 years ago. And teenagers are more prone to acquiring this disorder, and so are women. Women are more prone to get it than men are. Women also tend to dwell on their causes of depression. So they call up their best friend. I'm not feeling good. I feel horrible. Oh, what's the matter? Oh, I don't know. It's just, and they talk about it, and they get worse and worse and worse as they're talking about it until they turn a corner and they keep talking about it and they come out of it. This is called pre-therapy. You don't need a therapist. You need a best friend to listen to you. You need another ear. This is part of therapy we'll talk about when we get to the therapy section. You don't necessarily need to go see a therapist if you have a best friend forever who can talk to you about it. For a woman, can you imagine a man calling up his best friend and going, I don't feel good. Oh, you poor thing. Like, no, men are macho. We don't do that. Instead, we call up our best friend and we say, let's go kill something. Let's go hunting, right? But remember, from positive psychology, it's on a square curve. So as I'm doing that particular thing, I am distracting myself from what it is that I was thinking. I'm no longer depressed until I get finished with it. I'm right back into my depression because I did not fix the issue. I did not talk about it and get it taken care of. So men tend to distract themselves. Women tend to work through. Why is it that we get depressed? There's lots of different reasons, and we have talked about some of these already. The serotonin gene, if you have two short versions of the serotonin gene, then you have a greater chance of being depressed. Doesn't mean you're going to be depressed, but you have a greater chance of being depressed and to stay depressed longer than a person who has two large genes. So that's a genetic, biological reason for depression. The brain shows lower activity in the left frontal lobe as well. Now, we don't know if that's caused by the depression or if it causes the depression, but we know that people who are depressed show lower activity in the left frontal lobe. Also, if you're sick, you get depressed more easily if you're sick or stressed. And you think if your thoughts turn negative, you're going to be more likely to become depressed. And of course, self-esteem. If you think badly about yourself, you have a better chance of being depressed than if you have high self-esteem. You're not going to be as depressed as often. So that's other possible causes. But the last one is called SAD, seasonal affective disorder. Right, SAD. We came up with this idea. It could have been, remember, affective means emotion. So seasonal emotion disorder could have been SAD instead of SAD, but seasonal affective disorder. And this is believed to be caused by sunlight and the lack of sunlight. So when the sunlight hits your eyes have a mechanism that produces melatonin. Melatonin helps to raise your emotions to keep you from being depressed. So if this, and it's on a spectrum, again, it's at a spectrum, if we test people, we would find the normal population produces a certain amount of melatonin, but some people produce less melatonin, some people produce more melatonin. Well, the people that produce less melatonin during the summer months, there's plenty of sunlight. They get enough sunlight to not be depressed. In the wintertime, the days become shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. I think the shortest day of this year is going to be in December 20th, I believe. Anybody know that for a fact? I can't remember exactly. Somewhere in that time frame, December 20th is the shortest day of the year. Less sunlight than any other day of the year and more nighttime. So if they are producing just enough melatonin in their eyes during the summer to keep them from being depressed, in the wintertime, they're not going to be producing enough because there's not as much sun, plus we're not outside as much, and so they get depressed in the wintertime. So if you know someone who gets depressed during the winter, it's very possible they have seasonal affective disorder, and it's real easy to fix. Put a sun bulb in their house, a grow light. There are light bulbs that mimic the sunlight frequencies. And so we've seen that people that have these light bulbs in their house tend to be better off than those who do not have it in their house during the wintertime. I used to work for the Coast Guard, and there were people, I was on the team that created the very first electronic mail program for the Coast Guard. And we connected all the air stations together. Kodiak is one of the air stations. And there are people in Kodiak who absolutely love Kodiak. And there are people that absolutely hate Kodiak. And if they have SAD, of course they do. There are 6 months of the year where it's a bright light, fine for them. 6 months of the year where it's dark. Oh my gosh, no, they cannot handle it. And so there are people that just love Kodiak and people that hate Kodiak. But it's a form of unipolar depression. Now, on the other side, we have this spectrum. There are people that have enough normal amounts of melatonin created, people who have less amounts. There are also people who have more. In the wintertime, they're fine. They have just enough to keep them going. In the summertime, too much sun creates mania for them. They're manic in the summertime. So there's both sides of this issue. and intense light therapy for those who have the depression side. They can use light therapy to help them. Do you understand SAD? And there are people out there who have SAD that have no idea that that's why they're depressed during the summer, winter. They blame it on Christmas and Thanksgiving and not being around their their loved ones, their families. But that's not it. It's not about being depressed during a specific time of the winter. It's about being depressed during the seasonal winter time, not just the different Christmas holiday, Thanksgiving holiday season. The other side is anxiety, and there are more people with anxiety than there are with depression. 15% of the population has experienced symptoms of anxiety great enough to qualify as an anxiety disorder. It is more common than depression, but it is not diagnosed as often as depression. And there are many different types. There is panic disorder, and I'm sure that somebody in the class, because it is so frequent, there are people who have panic disorders and don't even know why they're doing it. They don't know they have panic disorder. So it's marked by panic attacks that have no connection to events in the person's present experience. They can be walking down the sidewalk, and all of a sudden they start shaking, sweating, their heart racing, they feel dizzy, they're leaning up against the wall going, I'm having a heart attack. I think I'm having a heart attack. It's a panic disorder for no apparent reason. It's called free-floating anxiety. And 2% of the population experiences this form of anxiety, and again, more common in women than in men. Phobias are fears, extreme fears, involving a pathological fear of a specific object or situation. 12.5% of the population suffers from some sort of phobia. Social phobias are the most common of them. How many of you have a fear of something? Everybody has a fear of something, right? A fear of, tell me what it is, what you have a fear of. There are people that have fears of clowns. People have fears of snakes. People have fears of spiders, right? Wasps. Oh my gosh, wasps. I hate them, especially the ground yellow jacket wasps. I hate those things. Needles. Yes. Heights. Yeah. So we all have a fear of something, but it's not a phobia, and there's a difference. I do not like spiders. I have a fear of spiders. If I see a spider, if I'm walking down the sidewalk and there's a spider on the wall, I will go on the other side around it to get away from it. But I'm doing consciously staying away from the spider. I have consciously determined what it is that I'm going to do to stay away from that spider. If I have a magazine in my hand, I'm slapping it. I'm going to kill that spider. Right? If I have a phobia, I see the spider on the wall and I jump away into traffic and get myself killed because I'm not thinking clearly. That's a phobia. It's an extreme fear that produces a reaction that may very well be something that will make it worse for you than what that particular thing that caused the phobia is. Do you understand the difference between fear and phobia? Seeing yeses. All right. Now, here's a list. Agoraphobia, as I said, is the fear of public spaces and open spaces, the public places and open spaces and people. Agoraphobia. Lots and lots of people have this particular type of anxiety phobia. Then there's acrophobia. Somebody said fear of heights. It's called acrophobia. Okay? The arachnophobia, fear of spiders. Okay? But these names will define phobias. So it's not just a fear, it's an irrational fear, very, very huge fear that causes you to perform acts, behaviors that are not appropriate to the situation. It's like hurting yourself in order to get away from them. And agoraphobia is defined as the fear of sexual abuse here, but it's really aggravated assault. So it's really the fear of being beat up. Aggravated assault is what agoraphobia is. And there are all kinds of phobias, and there's a list, phobialist.com. You can go and you can look up your own I had somebody who was afraid of frogs. There's a name for that. And there are people that are afraid of long words. Imagine, there's a person who's afraid of long words. Now, we can laugh at them, but it is not funny for the person who has that fear, that phobia, right? So it sounds laughable, but these people need help. And what's strange about the fear or the phobia of very long words is that that particular word that means that is the longest of all the phobias. It's the word with the most number of letters in it. So the fear of long words, whatever, I can't remember what it's called, but that's anxiety disorders. Now, some people think that the reason we have anxiety disorder is because we are prepared to have anxiety disorder. Our body is prepared for it, the preparedness hypothesis. We've already talked a little bit about this. The notion that we have an innate tendency to respond quickly and automatically to stimuli that posed a survival threat to our ancestors. If our ancestors survived, they survived because they had that reaction. And we have that reaction because they passed that on to their children. The people who didn't have that reaction didn't live long enough to have children. So a person who loved snakes, 5,000 years ago, they picked up every snake they saw. They played with them as kids because they loved snakes. They thought it was really cool. They had no fear of snakes. Eventually, they pick up a coral snake or a rattlesnake or a water moccasin or something else that bites them, and they die because children and the venom of that snake, they're going to die if they get bit by that. So they didn't live long enough to have children. Those people who are fearful of snakes, they stayed away from them. They lived long enough to have children who are also fearful of snakes. And that's what would explain why we're afraid of snakes and lightning, but not afraid of automobiles and electrical sockets, which actually cause more harm in our society right now than lightning and snakes do. So the brain, the mechanism that's most associated with anxiety is probably the amygdala. And remember, everybody has an amygdala, but it's a spectrum of how much does that amygdala actually react. Some people's amygdalas are bigger than others. Some people are smaller than others. Some people's amygdalas are more active than others. So a person with an active amygdala is going to be more fearful than a person who does not. And so we're on this curve again, right? This spectrum that fits the normal distribution curve. And if it fits the normal distribution curve, it means some people are on the very far end where they don't have any activity at all in their amygdala. They don't feel fear, and another group on the other side that feels way more fear than the normal population does. We're all different, and yet similar, the same. Another kind of anxiety disorder is obsessive compulsive disorder. Now, we tend to put this together as one problem, but it's actually two different problems. Obsession is your thoughts, just continuously over and over and over again thinking about something. Compulsion is the behavior, and it is not necessarily associated with a thought. So a habit can be a compulsion. Without a thinking about it, you have a compulsion to do a particular thing over and over and over again. And the obsession is your thought processes, which may not be connected with any kind of behavior pattern. But we put them together because we mostly see them together, a condition categorized by patterns of persistent, unwanted thoughts and behaviors. 2.5% of the population has this disorder, and there appears to be a genetic connection, a genetic link, which means if your mother and father have it, then you have a higher chance than the normal population of having it. They also have tics, not the blood-sucking animals, but the tics are little movements that they can't control. And Tourette syndrome also has these tics as well. So unwanted involuntary movements and twitches such as exaggerated eye blinking. Right? The somatoform disorders are disorders that are associated with, they're called psychogenic disorders because they're associated with no physical reason, no biological reason. So somatoform disorders are psychological problems appearing in the form of bodily symptoms or physical complaints. They were once known as the neurotic disorders, and now also conversion disorders, what we call a portion of them. The psychogenic disorder is a disorder of the mind. There's no reason why my hand hurts. No physical reason for it. So why is it hurting? It's psychological. Conversion disorder is a somatoform disorder marked by paralysis, weakness, or loss of sensation with no discernible physical cause. The most common is glove anesthesia. In glove anesthesia, the person says, I can't feel my hand. My hand is dead. Right? Now, are they telling the truth? Or are they just trying to get out? Are they malingerers? And we'll talk about malingering also, people that just make up problems in order not to do work. So the doctor will have you put your hands behind your back and then take a pin and stick a pin in your hand. They do not feel it. It's dead. They're not feeling anything in their hand. But then the doctor sticks it in their arm. Ow! I didn't say my arm felt dead. It's my hand that feels dead. But that's not physically possible. The way that the neurons work, if your thumb and forefinger, another name for the index and pointer finger and phalange, the forefinger, if the thumb and forefinger are dead, then this entire structure of your arm should also be dead. That's the way the neurons work. So this should not exist. You shouldn't be able to feel here and not feel here. It should be dead all the way up, but it's not. And that's what makes it psychogenic. And we can say that there is a physical reason. There is a brain mechanism we know of because we've studied it already, and that is in the parietal lobe, we have the somatosensory cortex. That is the cortex that connects to all of our skin senses. So we know that that particular portion of our brain is the part that senses when something touches our skin. If that goes dead for some reason, then we would never know that somebody touched our skin. And so there's a good possibility that the somatosensory cortex is somehow malfunctioning, and that's what's causing these particular issues. Did you get that? There is a physical reason, but it's still in your brain. It's still psychogenic. Right? Maybe one day we'll be able to figure that out by watching a functional MRI for the person who has glove anesthesia and notice that that portion of the brain never activates. We can't see that yet. We're not that good yet. We will be. Hypochondriasis, you know hypochondriacs. I'm sure you've heard the name hypochondriac before. Hypochondriasis is a somatoform disorder involving excessive concern about health and disease. Do you know anybody like that? They're always looking up symptoms. They're always worried that they have some sort of problem. They're always looking for that thing that's wrong with them. They know there's something wrong with me, and I'm trying to figure out what it is. Right? And I'm sure you know people like that. Hypochondriasis or hypochondriacs. Now, there's a different type of hypochondriac called a malingerer. The malingerer are hypochondriacs who use fake complaints to get out of work. I need somebody to move this box from here over to the other person's office. Oh, I can't do that. My hand's dead today. You know, I've got glove anesthesia. I can't hold the box. All right, I need somebody to do. No, I can't. I'm limping today. My hip hurts too much. I can't. I got to sit here and do this work. I can't do anything extra. They're always finding reasons why they can't do anything else, and that's a malingerer, to get out of work using the health concerns to get out of work. And I'm sure you know people like that as well. Dissociative disorders are an interesting group. I really like this group. If I was a therapist, I would want to work with these people, dissociative disorders. A group of pathologies involving fragmentation of personality, and they include amnesia, dissociative fugue, whose number one symptom is amnesia, and depersonalization disorder and dissociative identity disorder, DID. The amnesia is not the anterograde amnesia, not the kind that Clive Wearing has, who lost all of his ability to put down new memories. It's not that kind of amnesia. This is amnesia of information you should know. What's your name? Where do you live? What's your phone number? Where do you work? Now, this is a temporary loss in most cases, in young people especially, but if you are taking drugs or alcohol, or if you have damage to your brain because you hit your head, or you have a disease of some kind that's damaging your brain, then certainly you can lose information permanently. But most of the dissociative disorders are caused by some form of loss that will recover. Sort of like the brain rebooting, like a computer rebooting. You lost it for a short period of time and then it comes back. That's a dissociative disorder. And then dissociative fugue is the same thing, loss of who you are. You don't know your name, don't know where you live. Well, if you don't know where you live, you're not going to make it home that night. Your wife's going to call up, or your husband's going to call up the police and go, my spouse didn't come home. Where's my spouse? She's lost, or he's lost. And so they go out looking for you. You will never be found near your home or near your place of work. They are running away from life. They have had a nervous breakdown. They have lost their ability to know who they are consciously, but unconsciously, they know who they are, they know where they work, they know where their house is, because they're not found anywhere near their house or their work locations. They're running away from life. And that's dissociative fugue. And again, stress is a huge aspect of it, and alcohol can also be associated with it. And it seems to be related to an impairment of the brain in some way, shape, or form. You get that? Do you understand that? It is a conscious loss of where you're supposed to be, but unconsciously, you do know where you're supposed to be. Depersonalization disorder is losing who you are, losing what you are. So an abnormality involving the sensation of mind and body having separated or out-of-body experiences, like sort of astral projection, but not really. You'd look in a mirror and go, that's not me. That's not me. Did I just move into another? This is not me. So I've depersonalized. This is not me. Oliver Sacks, I've already talked about a few times, wrote the book, The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat. And in there, he had a man who had depersonalization disorder. Have any of you seen the movie The Godfather? How many of you have seen the movie The Godfather? No, lots of no's. Wow. The first one. Well, The Godfather is a mafia movie, and the Godfather is the head of his particular family, the Don, and somebody messed with him and he didn't like it. And so in this movie, he had the man that messed with him, his favorite horse was killed. He had the favorite horse killed. But not only that, he had the man's favorite horse's head cut off and then put into his bed very gently, so that when he woke up in the morning, he woke up with the head of a horse, his favorite horse, in his bed with him. Well, in this story that Oliver Sacks talks about of one of his patients, because his stories are real, his stories are about his patients, the man woke up and somebody had put a leg in his bed. There was a leg, a left leg. Somebody had put a left leg in his bed with him. So he grabbed the leg and he threw it out of bed. And he fell out of bed because it was his leg. But he had no connection to that leg anymore. The proprioceptors were gone. He had no feeling, the somatosensory cortex was not responding as he grabbed his leg. It was just wasn't his leg. He had no actionable reason to believe it was his leg. So that's depersonalization disorder. And when you lose your sense of who you are, it can be very frustrating, of course, and scary. But there's another aspect to this, and I kind of like this. This is a true story. This is Oliver Sacks. When Oliver Sacks was a medical doctor, a neurologist, and he graduated from medical school, and his first work out of medical school was at a mental health ward, And he was the doctor at this mental health ward. And this, at those times in that time frame, people who were in comas were placed into mental health wards to be taken care of. And so he had a number of patients at that mental health ward who he cared for who were in a coma. And you all know what a coma is, a person who is completely, almost like they're asleep continuously, never wake up, no connection with the world at all. And the nurses would take these patients out of their beds, put them into wheelchairs and wheel them in to the main room where all the other mental health patients existed together, and so that they could be watched over during the day, and then they were taken back and put back into their bed at night. Well, there was a particular person who had a habit habitually bouncing a ball onto the floor, onto the wall, back at them again, bouncing the ball over and over and over again, just continuously bouncing a ball. But that day, there was something on the floor that they didn't notice, and so they bounced the ball. It hit that thing, sped off in another direction, and right at one of these coma patients. And the coma patient caught the ball and froze. That is not a coma patient. There's something else going on there. So Dr. Sachs took the ball out of his hand, put his hand back in his lap, walked away from him, turned around, and tossed him the ball. And the patient caught the ball and froze again. So he gathered up all these coma patients and started to figure out what's wrong with them, and found out that they did not have enough of a particular neurotransmitter. And so he gave them more of this neurotransmitter, and they came out of their comas and started talking and walking around and just as a normal person, just regular normal person. But the problem was that their brain had gotten tolerant to the particular amount of neurotransmitter that their brain normally produced. And he was giving them more of it. But that more, just like any other drug, they got tolerant to that as well. And so he had to give them more and more and more, bigger and bigger doses, until finally they just didn't respond anymore and they went back into their comas. And there's a movie, Robin Williams played Dr. Oliver Sacks in a 1990 movie called Awakenings, if you ever get a chance to see that movie. It's a fabulous, fabulous movie. And it seems sad, but these patients were able to finally tell their loved ones that they loved them, to complete their life, to fill out all the paperwork, because they knew they were going to die. And everybody knows they're going to die at some point, but to be told, you have 6 months to live, then you can do all the things that are necessary. As long as you met all of Erickson's phases, you can do all the things that are necessary to finish your life out, complete your life out. And if you ever get a chance to see that movie, a fabulous movie. The next one is dissociative identity disorder. This is one of I would love to work with these people. These are people, it's also called multiple personality disorder. Have any of you heard of multiple personality disorder before? Yes, a number of you have. Okay. So these are people who believe that there are more than one person living in their brain. Now, we already know that we can take a split brain patient, somebody whose corpus callosum is split. They have two different brains that are not talking to each other, and one of the brains is negative, one of the brains is positive, one of the brains does one kind of thing, one of the brains does another kind of thing. So there is sort of a biological reason that it could happen, but these people are taken over by these personalities, and we know that the left and right brain, split brain patients, they don't get taken over by the personality. So there is some question as to whether this really happens or not. And let me show you, have any of you seen the movie Identity? It's a really cool movie, and I'm going to actually show you this trailer to the movie. Here it is. Has anybody ever seen the movie Identity? Nobody. Oh, this is a cool movie. A couple of you have. Good. Okay, so here's the trailer to that movie, and then I'll tell you about it. Oh, I'm going to turn my sound off, my microphone off, so I don't have a reverb.
There was a storm.
It was an accident. We had an accident.
And we got stuck and we couldn't get out. We couldn't get out because of the storm.
It's flooded. It's dead end.
You're the manager? Officer Rose. Transporting a prisoner here. But the roads were all flooded and I could use a room.
I don't think we can get out tonight.
I'm not staying here. Are you out of your mind?
There was no place else to go.
What happened at the motel? People started dying.
What's going on?
Go in your room and lock your door.
And then their bodies, they disappeared.
Nobody in there.
That's not possible. I saw what happened. We all saw what happened.
This doesn't make any sense.
Maybe there's some connection between all of us.
Like what? My birthday next week.
Me too.
Me too. Yeah.
The secret lies within. So all these people are at this hotel, and none of them know each other. But they all have some kind of connection. They all have a birthday that week. No, they don't. They all have a birthday the same day. They were all born at the same time. Because they're all the same person. And there's a psychiatrist who has a patient at a hospital who's multiple personality disorder. This patient is in a prison hospital because he killed somebody. The prison is going to put this person to death, and the psychiatrist says, no, no, no. I can bring all these multiple personalities back together again, and the one that's left over did not commit the crime. One of these others is the murderer. And if I can get rid of the murderer, then this person should not be in jail. And so the psychiatrist is killing them all off. And when he kills one, they just disappear because they're not real anyway. I'm not going to tell you the ending of the story because it's really good. If you ever get a chance to see this movie, it's a really good movie. So these people who are multiple personality, they do not necessarily know each other, the different personalities. So, and there's usually way more than just two personalities. So the personalities tend to, that some of them take over. This one doesn't know what's happening while this one's in charge. Then this one takes over, and this one doesn't know what's happening while this one's in charge. And they may not even know that the other one exists. You may have a perfectly prim and proper preacher's wife, and the other a slut. Perfectly, completely different. personalities. And that's identity. But the first one that was really known is Sybil. There's still questions about whether Sybil really was multiple personality, but there are people who don't even believe that multiple personality exists, psychologists and psychiatrists who do not believe it. Then there are psychologists and psychiatrists that do. So it is a condition in which an individual displays multiple identities. Usually it's confused with schizophrenia, but schizophrenia is a split with reality. And these people, although it seems like it can't be real because these people say I have multiple people in my head, they can't be real, right? But every single one of those personalities knows how to use money, knows who the president, vice president is, knows how society works. They're grounded in reality other than the fact that they say there's multiple personalities in my head. So this condition usually occurs in women, again, and normally more than two identities. And the split usually appears in childhood as a defense to protect a person from a terrifying event. Usually appears in childhood. Hello, Freud, who says, whatever bad things are happening to you, it's because of something that happened in your childhood. So this Sally Fields, who was also the flying nun, she played Sybil in the 1976 movie, and then there was a remake in 2007. I don't know who played Sybil in that particular one. But Sybil's happened about 3 years of age. Sybil had a break at about 3 years of age, and this is what happened to her to cause the break. So at 3 years of age, her grandmother passed away, and her mom brought her to the funeral, which is fine for a 3-year-old. They should be able to understand, start to get the idea of what death is. There are appropriate ways to help a child to understand death. And this is not the way to do it. Her mother took her to the funeral and took her up to the casket, picked her up, laid her down on her grandmother's cold, dead corpse and told her to kiss your grandmother goodbye. That is not the way to teach a child about death. And she freaked out and she couldn't handle it, and so she created a personality that could. But it's like a mirror splitting open. If you break a mirror, it doesn't just break in half. It shatters. And that's what the personality does when something like this occurs. To create this particular issue, it shatters into pieces, and each piece being a different personality. Do you understand multiple personality disorder? Okay, seeing a lot of yeses. If you have any questions, type them in. So that is dissociative identity or multiple personality disorder. Body dysmorphic syndrome is a problem with the way that you see yourself. A lot of people want to be perfect. There's no such thing. You should not try to be perfect. You should try to be the perfect you, not what society says is perfect. Be you. You are wonderful people. But we tend to buy into advertising. And advertising uses all kinds of tools to make the women in those pictures and the men in those pictures to look their idea of what perfect is. Their idea. And they then control society. There was an island, I can't remember the island's name at the moment. It's in my lectures. And before the island ever got television, the most desirable people, women, on the island were huge, big. The larger the woman, the more desirable they were. Completely opposite of what we have here. And television was introduced to the island. It took only 1 year before the most desirable women were the skinny women. Within 1 year, television had completely turned on that particular island's idea of what beauty was. That's how powerful advertising is. So I want to show you this movie here, this little commercial.
Growing up, I was kind of always self-conscious, like wanting to look a certain way.
It's a never-ending battle.
And you look at yourself and you know you can never attain that ideal.
As I've gotten older, you see different changes.
I feel like I have some wrinkles around my eyes.
I'm never going to be skinny. I'm not a skinny girl.
It can be hard when you see models and celebrities and like you just don't look the same. I did not expect it to look like that at all.
I feel like it doesn't even look like me.
I think because I know myself, this looks really different. Why would you want to make someone look so different?
I like my freckles. I think they add character, and the fact that they're gone, I don't even know who that is.
Just as a normal person, seeing yourself change and your identity changed, it's pretty shocking.
Once someone else has done your makeup and someone else has done your hair and someone's directed the way your body looks and then taken away your imperfections, then there's not much left of who you really are. This is how I always wanted to see myself, but now that I see it, I'm like questioning why I ever wanted to look like that.
You look at these ads in magazines, you see these women who look absolutely flawless, and you're like, I wish I could look like that, but who really looks like this?
I think we live in a really interesting time where we feel like we have to make people look to the standard that's not attainable for anybody.
Instead of looking at other things and trying to aspire to be something else, we should just be comfortable in who we are and just try to be our best selves.
I think something that everybody should keep in mind is that it's natural to be critical of yourself. It's natural to be uncomfortable or awkward, but you just have to know that the ideal just doesn't exist.
The ideal just doesn't exist. So go ahead and eat as many Big Macs as you want to. I think this is one of the worst ad placements I've ever seen. So we tend to look at ourselves in relationship to what advertising agencies say is perfect, the way we should look. And if we buy into that, we can have what's called body dysmorphic disorder, or trying to create something that really will never be able to create. So no one looks like the so-called perfect model. And this I've used specifically, I purposely made this men because usually it's women, but we have a body that's okay. There's nothing really wrong with our body, but what we see in the mirror is a huge body. We see ourselves improperly, body dysmorphic syndrome. We see ourselves in a different way than we should. And so this person would go on diets and diets and diets, become anorexic or bulimic in order to lose weight and hurt themselves. And that's what pathology is, right? It's hurting yourself to the point where you cause personal distress. Well, if your heart isn't working right, it's going to be distressful, and you can't meet the demands of life. This is more typical, the bottom one, more typical of what happens with men. This man has really good muscle tone, but sees himself in the mirror as being too skinny, not enough muscle. And so they work out, and they take drugs to make themselves bigger. They work out too much. They shoot themselves up with other stuff until they finally get to the point where they can't even wipe their own ass. Now, this is not all muscle. This is a liquid that they put into their body that actually increases the girth of the fibers that are in your arms and your body, your legs. And actually there have been people who have overdone it to the point where they explode. They're just out of their skin. They explode out of their skin. And of course they're doing damage to themselves. But it's not just their own view of how they look, because these people get up in front of others at shows and the world applauds them. Yay! Gives them gold medals, silver medals, bronze medals, and even if they don't win a medal, it's, hey, you look great, hooray! So they're getting applause and accolades from the world for their own psychological issue, body dysmorphic syndrome. And it happens to women too. So women are supposedly to be the perfect Barbie doll image, but if you blow up a Barbie doll to its correct image, then you get something completely different. And these are two different women. The one on the left is in the United States. The one on one in the middle and the right is in England. Both of them are in the Guinness Book of World Records. Again, accolades, yay! They're also both strippers, so they're getting A from their customers too. So they're getting positive feedback for destroying their bodies. Both of these women started out in the world as B, Baker cups. And now they are zebra cups. And they have in the Guinness Book of World Records for the largest implants. And I can't even imagine. How do you drive a car? You have to get back. How do you reach the steering wheel? You're destroying your back muscles, your bone structures. You're putting too much weight on your bone structures. You are hurting yourself. And that's part of a pathology. That's what pathology is about. So this is what happens as well in women who have body dysmorphic syndrome. I'm not big enough. I need to be bigger. I need to make my lips bigger. You've seen some of those women who have had so much surgery that they look weird. And then they can't move their lips properly to talk properly because they've got Botox, and the Botox has destroyed some of the fibers in their mouth and in their skin. So we're pushed by advertising to look a particular way, and if we fall into that trap, then we can hurt ourselves. Don't fall into the trap. You are wonderful, wonderful people. The way you look. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And we'll talk about that also when we get to the social psychology section as well. And I'm going to stop here. I'm not going to go any further than this because I stopped here in the last class. I don't want to get too far outside of the two classes. So we will talk about eating disorders. We've already talked about Karen Carpenter, but I didn't show you any pictures really of her. These are the pictures of her. We'll talk about her and anorexia and bulimia when we come back on Thursday. Are there any questions about anything that I've covered today? Okay. Remember that you could turn in your essays all the way up to December 7th, but I will not take them any later than December 7th. And there's no, you don't get any points off for, being anywhere between November 21st and December 7th. It's okay. You could turn them in at that time. But if I were you, I would have them done before Thanksgiving so you could just relax during Thanksgiving. Right? Get them in as soon as you can, but no later than December 7th. So if you want to talk to me, I'll stay around and let you talk to me. Otherwise, have a great day. I will see you on Thursday. Stay healthy. Bye. Okay, everybody's gone.